we going back to college, huh, boys?
Going back to college, indeed, my man. How are things with you here as a new school year begins?
Uh, Going well. We started up our new podcast, Effort and Attitude. And we're just doing life coaching and social emotional building in athletes right now. And,
Uh,
and so whenever I get a chance to just talk ball with the Maddox boys, I'm in.
well, you gotta love it, and I'm not sure we've had a second Saturday of the college football season where there've been as many, I guess, surprising upsets as we saw last week. I mean, Texas A&M loses to Appalachian State at home. Notre Dame loses at home. Baylor, number 9 in the country, lost. I mean, just a little bit of a crazy Saturday here. Alabama, number 1 in the country, almost lost, and now aren't number 1 anymore.
Listen, that's what you gotta love about college football or in football in general. Is that the margins for winning are small, and it doesn't. The world, our country has shrunk. So like the blue blood programs, is recruiting. If you can recruit your style of player, as BYU has traditionally have done for years, all the way back to Steve Young, um, that is not as much of a surprise as much as Baylor beating Notre Dame. BYU beating Baylor. Look, Baylor is getting back. They're getting back to where they were about 6, 7 years ago after the big scandal. But BYU has been consistent for years, and I think that just shows in them beating. And for whatever it's worth, that went to 2 overtimes. It was a late game.
Yeah.
But like you said, Notre Dame, Marshall, that's a completely different story there. But I think what Notre Dame has continued to show us is they can have a cycle every 4 years where they are a tough team to beat. And right now, that is not the cycle they're on at all. And then App State, if anyone's been following them or been walking the Appalachian Mountain Trail, you know that they don't mess around all the way back from when they were 1AA or FCS, and they popped Michigan. I mean, that might have been the kiss of death for Lloyd Carr at the time. But now that they're in the big boy dance, but Texas A&M in College Station, hello, hot coffee football is back. What else you want?
Yeah, I mean that to me was one of the. And to be honest, Malik, like Appalachian, they almost beat UNC last week too.
Mm-hmm.
So it almost felt like they were owed a win here, and they ended up getting it against A&M despite A&M paying them to come down there. I want to ask you a little bit, from a coach's perspective, in preparing for a game where basically you're getting paid to play this team. Like, I mean, is that like an extra motivation you think for some of these schools? I think it's like goes without saying, but I mean, from the coach's perspective, these coaches must live for a game like A&M, where A&M looks at it, oh, it's just Appalachian State, but for Appalachian State, this is a national title game.
It's the gift and the curse, right? The programs, you buy the big teams who, for lack of a better way, are trying to buy a win just to kind of get their feet underneath the program before they get into conference. So on one end, like I get it, but you have some kids who felt slighted by some big time programs. And when I was coaching those games, we played Syracuse, Boston College. Look, we were in it, but we didn't win. But the players, the locker room, went in there like this is my moment. If I want to go to the NFL, if I want to turn some heads in the conference, or even my coaches, playing up is giving you that opportunity. Now, that's the gift part. The curse is if your team is able, not competitively able to really compete, you can walk out of that game beat up. And that part right there can change a good team in your pursuit to win your conference and win your league and change everything. And now you're kind of trying to chase your tail, find your starting quarterback or your starting linebacker, i.e. Wagner. Wagner took it under the chin. I coached at Wagner. We played in some of those big games, but we never played any Big Ten teams. And now they playing Rutgers, which is across the bridge, but like they may have lost a 3-time all defensive player of the year playing against Rutgers. That can change their conference season, their playoff chase for the FCS championship. And so you hope that you can come out of those games healthy, find out more about yourself as a ball club. But the paycheck sometimes is not worth it. As we all recognize in the business world, as entrepreneurs, all money's not good money. In some cases, those teams can end up wounded and not being able to recover.
Well, I'd like to shift it to Alabama, Texas a little bit here because I'm interested. I'm interested from you now. You know, from a coaching perspective, do you think we found out more about Alabama in this game and that they had some holes that could be exposed, or did we find out more about Texas and that maybe their resurgence is coming a little quicker than we thought?
Oh, I think that is, that is the $1 million question, and unfortunately, I'm a always buy into the Roll Tide machine. Because if you were watching that game, even when Texas went up in the second half, it was like they got a shot at a whole Alabama offense as they had to go onto the field in the fourth quarter and get the ball downfield. There was no panic in the sideline or in that group that was going out onto the field. And you're talking about Longhorn Stadium? Like, that thing was shaking most likely. These guys are when I talk about my company, social, emotional, preparing athletes and students, that's Nick Saban in a nutshell. And at 70, I think he's gotten a little wiser too to recognize that these kids are not the same kids of old. So that's why he's been able to continue to have that success. Now on Texas front, look, the quarterback play wasn't great. But they took advantage of the opportunities that they had. They didn't throw any touchdowns. In fact, they dropped 3 of them. And so from that point in the first half, when they dropped those 3, they dropped 2 wide open touchdown passes, overthrew 1, the other kid dropped it. In the second half, they dropped 1. You're not beating Alabama like that. Even though the score may be close, you're just not going to beat them like that because that will add up. And it always does. You'll turn on ESPN, turn on the Mannix brothers, turn on the Big Jab. We'll talk about the plays that added up to a victory or a loss. And in this case, it was more about Texas not being able to beat Alabama more than Alabama having to prove they can beat Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was something that's interesting too about that because now obviously with Georgia again shutting out Stanford, 33-0 win, they kind of get the unanimous number 1 vote, ascending to the top ahead of Alabama after that close loss. Do you think that the Georgia Bulldogs being at number 1 may be a little bit overdue? I kind of feel like they should have gotten that number 1 ranking to start the season, and especially after week 1, the way they performed. I'm not sure how you feel, but it just seems like the Georgia Bulldogs are really the team to beat again this year in college football.
Period. And everyone knows it. But with Alabama, and I think the Crimson fans know that's going to show itself, improve itself at the end. And in week 1, and which makes this much different than the NFL is the rankings, right? Like they all matter. They all matter. And if you are number 1 team today, and it's proven itself in time again, it's only a few teams that can hold and sustain that type of success. And Coach Smart said, if you think we're gonna be hunted, you're tripping. We will be hunting you. Right? And I said, okay, coach, all right. And that's the level of sustainability and awareness an entire program has to have to hold number 1 the whole year. And especially when you talk about being in the SEC, forget about it. But if they do, If they do, it's because they beat Alabama at the back end. And they may have to beat Alabama twice. We know that. And so I also want to share though, and with that number one, I think you're in a better spot if you're like 6'7", honestly, right? Because 6'7", even if you lose early, it's not gonna drop you all the way out of the race. If you are in the top 5 early and you don't drop it early, you will drop completely out of the conversation if you are not in the SEC in the tail end of the season. So, it says something to not peak early and peak when it's time. Peak on the teams that you got to peak on, and be ready. And so I think Alabama is ready. I think Georgia will be ready. And that will be a clash of the Titans that everyone will anticipate and expect it to be.
Well, sticking with the SEC here, want to get your thoughts on Kentucky going to Florida and coming from behind and winning by 10 points there. That was certainly a result that jumped out at me. Big win for Tennessee too, needing overtime, but going to Pittsburgh and winning. I'd like your thoughts, if you got any, here on the Kentucky Wildcats and the Tennessee Volunteers, having both started the year 2-0, and if they are teams that could end up being in the mix maybe for either a big bowl game or maybe, dare we say, a playoff.
Well, I believe that Kentucky did what Kentucky did last year and the year before. They are not the Kentucky of old. Them Wildcats are about business. And they got one of the Stoop brothers leading the charge. So I'm going to tell you the proof of Florida's new hire. I have some coaching buddies that's on that staff. That was more of them seeing if they are really back. They have to fix the quarterback play. Their defense, for the most part, I think can hold the line if they can put up points. But I'm just saying that you playing Kentucky at home, Gainesville hasn't been Gainesville since Urban and Tebow. And then if you go further, they haven't been Gainesville since Danny Waffle and the ball coach Spurrier. So, I'm just saying, Kentucky, they're the program that's rising, and it's always been a challenge for them because they're in Kentucky, right? And no one thinks of Kentucky as a blue blood SEC program, but that was a convincing win, and they're 2-0. And you got the Florida Gators in Gainesville getting upset. It's an upset because they're in Gainesville. It is not an upset because Kentucky beat them.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. I mean, Florida as well has not been, as you mentioned, the contender they've been. Looking at the next week, I mean, we talked a little bit about BYU. They get 25. Oregon going in for a great matchup, which should be really fun. And then another top 25 matchup features A&M, who's looking their wounds against number 13 Miami, who started 2-0. Which out of those two matchups do you think you're most looking forward to as the top 25 team going at it? And out of A&M and Miami, and of course this game that's featuring BYU and Oregon has more to prove. Do you think BYU has more to prove here with a victory over another top 25 team, or do you think A&M, after losing to Appalachian, needs to kind of show they belong in the top 25?
Okay, so all right, you threw a lot of smoke at me here now. I'm gonna try to.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. I'm a strong hitter, so here we go. All right. I'm going to tell you to play off of our statement of BYU and Oregon. This is just your classic Mountain West, Pac-12 lineup. Both teams. I think Oregon has a little more to prove in their situation than BYU after licking their wounds. The other deal, I'll also say Texas A&M, yes, this is going to be a long week for them, period. They could play another FCS team or who are they playing? Doesn't matter. If
they got Miami, who's number 10.
Oh, boy. Okay, thank you. Okay.
I was wondering who's got more to prove in those matches. It's really two matchups that both teams really got a lot to show.
Yeah, agreed. But I agreed. Everyone is enamored with the U because of the history. Texas A&M, they they kind of got Jimbo Fisher. He's been kind of really the juice of the whole deal. Um, they have more to prove. I think if the U can beat them, you will be hearing everyone throwing up the U, saying the U is back. And I still don't believe that will be the proof. That will just be the proof that they're beating up on the Texas A&M team who does no longer have it. They lost their defensive coordinator Mike Elko to Duke, who I worked with at Hofstra, who's an awesome coach. And so they may be trying to figure out the sweet spot between coaches and players. And that's why that will be a much more critical game for Texas A&M. But if the U beats them, it says that Cristobal was the right hire potentially. But I think the U has to stabilize that entire program. They're going through coaches every other season. The other game that, and I think, Jeff, you alluded to Tennessee. Don't get me wrong, my man, Tennessee, the Vols finally got an opening win, and they're ranked in the top. But they beat up on an okay Pitt team. And so whoever Tennessee is playing next is going to definitely they're going to have to prove that they're really a contender, because since Fulmer left, they haven't been a contender. And that's when we were in high school and in college. So I look at those teams who really have some stuff to prove. Tennessee does. A&M certainly does. And I would tell you, BYU probably will take care of Oregon. Just the nature of the steady Eddie BYU program.
Yeah, Tennessee's got Akron at home next, by the way, so that's probably to be chalked up as a win. Although you never know.
You know what? You're right, Jeff. You're right. But you're right. That's still not a really tested opponent. And so you think about Tennessee could walk out of this 3-0 next week. It's still not really proven, can they really compete in the SEC? Like, it's so difficult to win, so hard to win, that the Tennessee may have 7 wins and be a joke in the SEC still.
Yeah, we certainly shall see there. Want to end things with a little discussion of the local college football here, because there's one pretty darn good story early on here in the state of Maine, and that's the University of New England Nor'easters, who started the year off at 2-0 with wins over Coast Guard Academy and then Bridgewater State here, and it will be home again in Biddeford against Gallaudet coming up on Saturday. I know you got some connections there to that program here, but this has been a good build job here by Coach Mike Lichten, and UNE football looks like they're ready to rock and roll this year.
Coach Lichten is a good friend of mine. He started that program from his infancy. And so in my mind, they're getting in their full stride as a program, a football program. I think they're on year 4 now. And when you look at, when you're on year 4, you're graduating your first set of seniors. And considering the pandemic offset everything, right? And so this is a season of a team as he's had since he's taken that program and built it from scratch. And now you're looking at, what he did at Becker and the things that he learned at UNH, and it's coming full circle in a program in our state. It's like an ocean when you play there. And boy, they got waves going up and down the field with the run game, pass game, and their defense has been is that 3-4 defense. If you don't know where it's coming from, it could be a long day. And so I wish them all the best. I know their league is not easy though. When you talk Division III, and then if I can give 2 local shout outs, Jeff, we did call the last state game against Oxford Hills and Thornton, and I don't know if you saw that, but gritty Oxford Hills got a W. And so shout out to Oxford Hills beating the big dogs, the perennial Thornton Academy 25-20. And of course, shout out Lewiston. They took an L last year to Bangor, but they got it back. They put up 55 points. And so shout out to the new coaching staff there in their victory against Bangor. So Yeah, this was a great weekend of football. I'm trying not to get fired at home because I have football on like 6 TVs, and so wish me all the luck in the world there.
We certainly will here, Malik. It's great to have you back, and we're looking forward to having you back every Monday here to chat college football with us. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me. Keep it local, boys.
You know we keep it local. Malik Hall talking college football with former college football coach Malik Hall. We will be right back. It is middays with Mannix and Mannix. 96.3.
Malik, what are you doing, Malik? Just don't stand there, Malik.